Our first conversation of the day. Please welcome U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Katherine and Semafor Africa Editor Yinka Adegoke.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I am very excited to welcome Ambassador Katherine, United States Trade Representative, and everyone knows my expertise on trade. So, but here's the thing that's really interesting about this week. Of course, President Biden is the most important person from the United States perspective this week with the US-Africa Leaders Summit, but I would hazard that you're the second most important person. And the reason for this is the importance of trade to the future of Africa, to the future of US-Africa relations. I want us to start with you just sort of laying out the current state of US-Africa trade. Where are things today? And then we can talk a little bit about where you see things going.
Okay. It's wonderful to be here with you and with all of you, and wonderful to be here in this week, which all of us in the administration, from the president on down, including myself, have been really looking forward to for the past many weeks and several months. You've talked about where we're going. You've mentioned where we are today, and we'll get to both. But let me start with where we've come from. The importance of US-Africa trade, and by US, let me stretch that meaning a little bit, goes all the way back to the founding of this country and before. If any of you ever have a chance to visit, and if you have been to the National Museum on African American history and culture, you go through the history portion of that exhibit, you start with the trade routes that connected Europe, Africa, and the colonies here in America. And that is, I think, an important founding point to keep in mind in terms of how intricately we have been linked, certainly for all of our history, but starting with our history. With respect to where we are today, we have, as the foundational trade program between the United States and the entire continent, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, which was established in 2000 by the United States Congress. I had the privilege of working for Congressman Rangel, who was one of the founding visionaries for AGOA. Incredibly proud of this program. We continue to be proud of this program. But I would say this. Today in 2022, we are looking at the tail end of this reauthorization for AGOA, which expires in 2025. The world that we're living in today certainly has been transformed by significant events that we have experienced since 2015, the last time the program was reauthorized. We've consistently seen that there are opportunities for the program to be better. There could be much better uptake and utilization of the program. Since 2015, also the African Continental Free Trade Area has come into being. That is a very important continental integration effort that we're incredibly supportive of, something we should take into account when we're thinking about where we go with the continent next. And I think that in this context, I wanted to mention that AFCFTA Secretary General Mene and I have had a number of very productive conversations over the course of this last year, and we are preparing to sign an MOU between USTR and the AFCFTA to create a platform for ongoing work. All of this, I am hoping, will feed into this conversation, incredibly important and timely, around what our vision is for this next phase of our relationship. There is a lot that we can do better, but I think also today in 2022, there are challenges and especially opportunities that we have to think about differently.
Is AGOA the... When you think about the future of AGOA, is it, from your perspective, are you thinking more about how to improve it, or are you thinking about totally, sort of tearing it apart and coming up with something completely different for this new period with the FCFTA and other developments.
So it's important for me to emphasize that AGOA is a partnership. It's a partnership between the United States and the African continent and the countries on the continent. It is also a partnership between the executive branch and the Congress. It is really the Congress that is responsible for this particular program. So I would be very remiss not to take that into account. That said, I think what we are seeing across the board in our trade practice is an opportunity that's coming out of challenges. A lot of our traditional trade programs are demonstrating that they have worked and that they are hitting some of their limits. With respect to AGOA, I think that, if we review how AGOA works, it is a preference program where the United States grants unilateral preferences and tariffs to developing countries with the economic theory that these preferences into the US market for specific sectors will help to stimulate development in our developing country partners. And I think that, the real focus of the conversations that I'm having with my trading partners now on the continent and across the emerging economy world is that what we are looking for in terms of breaking through on development is, yes, trade preferences, but even more how to attract investment.
Right. Yeah. This is where I was going next, because this seems to be, these are the conversations that I have, or that I hear, comments I hear, that we want something far more substantial, far more significant in terms of the way the United States works with individual African countries. And I think many people, particularly I guess the mid-sized to larger countries, are more interested in the bilateral relationships, a deeper, more significant free trade agreement.
Yeah.
Now, and I know you had a sort of a light version with Kenya in 2020 or 21. But where do you see that evolving? Do you see more of those happening? What's the thinking on the FTAs?
So I like the way you've posed the question, because what you've said is, well, AGOA is kind of foundational, and then we want to explore what next. And the middle income countries, the ones that are really poised to figure out how to break out of that middle income trap, to break through the ceiling, are now looking at AGOA and thinking, what happens when we graduate?
Right.
Is there a penalty? Is there a cliff that we go under? And what you said was a lot of these countries are looking at the bilateral relationship and looking for something more substantial, more meaningful, and then you went like a free trade agreement. I think this is where we see the real opportunity for innovation and expansion, for listening and partnership. The FTA is our other traditional trade practice, right? So we've got trade preferences that work for development, and then there's the full-on comprehensive FTA. I think that where we would like to explore is that middle ground. If you look at our FTA practice, especially with developing countries, I think there's a very, very good question around how successful have we been in bringing that substantive, meaningful opportunity and converting on it. So what we've done with Kenya on a bilateral basis is we've scoped out a strategic trade and investment partnership. It was just in Nairobi in September for President Ruto's inauguration, where I had the great privilege and honor of leading President Biden's delegation to the inauguration. And while there, notice that we're talking about it as the STIP. And our folks on the ground at our embassy are, pitching, well, the STIP is a step in the right direction. I think that if you look at the way we've scoped the Strategic Trade and Investment Partnership, what we're looking at is building out those parts of a traditional and also a new kind of trade relationship and trade partnership that's focused on resilience and especially inclusion, and that we see as working to complement the AFCFTA's program in terms of continental integration. Where we go from there, I'm very much hoping that the work that we do in the STIP will help us to figure out then that next level in terms of, the positive signals for investment, to attract investment and stimulate the long-term investment in Africa. We will be able to collaborate to develop together.
What do you, let's flip the question around, and I guess it's always awkward to comment on other countries and what they do, but I think we can talk in broad terms here, so you're not being too specific, but what would you like to see from the African side, from the African countries, not naming any specific country, but what would you, in broad terms, what would you like to see to really enable the United States to, as you say, move this forward, move up the value chain, if you like, for whatever.
That's fantastic. So let me put it this way. I think when I think about trade with the continent and the countries that make up the continent, the two words come to mind. The first one is partnership. The second one is commitment, our commitment to this partnership. What we really want to do is to be able to further develop and further grow our trade and investment relationship for Africa, but more importantly, with Africa. And so what I am really looking for from our African partners is that partnership bit. Around the conversation on AGOA, the traditional conversation on AGOA is, when are you going to reauthorize it?
Right.
For how long? Are you going to extend it? Even in this 10-year period, I know at the beginning of the 10-year period, it's from 2016, that first year, the conversation was, so you're going to extend this, right? Yeah. What I would really like, and I have invited my trade minister colleagues tomorrow to engage with us at the AGOA Ministerial. The question that I have posed is, please share with me your economies, your stakeholders' experience with the AGOA benefits. We see through the data an underutilization, but we also know that there are parts of this program that are tremendously successful. It's very popular. Help us figure out what is working and where it's falling short. And then also we want to hear, and I think this is really informative in terms of the scoping of the strategic trade and investment partnership with Kenya. I really went through multiple rounds with my counterpart at the time, Cabinet Secretary Betty Maina, asking her, what is it that you want from us, from this partnership in the next phase? And two of her highest priorities that she articulated, and she is so very smart. She's one of my favorite counterparts I've met. The two of her highest priorities were, one, investment, to be able to draw significant investment in to her economy, and the second one was capacity building. And I think that makes very, very good sense.
How does the United States enable that or help with that? I mean, is it just about putting more cash in, or are there other things, other levers that you can pull to enable it?
Sure. How does the United States facilitate that?
Yeah.
I think, first of all, we need our partners to share with us. Second of all, we need to be listening. We need to be listening to what the needs are. And I think that this is also a note that I've taken, which is capacity building, technical assistance, development, know-how, and resources. It needs to be provided where the needs and the aspirations are. So in terms of how we go about this, I'm open-minded. There are the traditional ways in which we have provided capacity building technical assistance. But again, this is an era that is inviting innovation and new ideas. And, I think that in order to be effective, once again, I'll come back to the theme of partnership. We need to build strong partnerships and good communication between us to be able to chart this course together.
At your meeting tomorrow, what are the highlights? What should your trade counterparts be expecting?
Certainly.
So you can break the news here, because we are a news platform.
Well, I don't know if I'm breaking news. I'm probably not. But just to inform all of you, we've got a good chunk of time set aside for this AGOA Ministerial. The time will be split into two engagements, 2 roundtables. The first one will be with members of Congress. Again, Congress is the author and the original creator of AGOA. The next version of AGOA in terms of that vision and sharing it and building it out is going to start with Congress. The second roundtable will be between trade ministers, and that's where I would like to probe more in terms of, leading the executive branch on trade. What should the vision be? Where are the needs? How can we make this better? And for the short term, the medium term, and the long term.
So will there be any specific announcements coming up?
I know you're really mining this. I guess you'll just have to wait and see.
But I want to come back to that point about, what the African countries should do or should be doing in terms of, you mentioned capacity building. Is that simply about knowledge within teams, or is it something more significant than that? I'm just trying to understand how you think about capacity building.
So something that I have heard as I've been talking to different counterparts, leaders of organizations in trade and development, has been what are additional ideas? Where can we push ourselves to harness trade tools in service of development and partnership? And part of the question has been, we have our traditional tools. What more can we be doing? What more can we be doing to get these programs to really sing and to rise to their potential? One of the things that came out of these engagements that I've had is, one of the challenges with doing the big traditional aggressively liberalizing all at once free trade agreement with a developing country partner is, unless they have built up their capacity to take advantage of the opportunities that kind of an arrangement with the United States brings.
I just want to be clear, is that about talent, or is it about sort of infrastructure, for want of a better word?
I think it's across the board. But to your point on talent, let me just say this. The future is Africa. When you look at the demographics, this is a continent with the youngest population. This is a continent with a tremendous amount of potential that we are already seeing being unlocked by engaging women in the economy. So if you just think about, and you're looking at the future, and we were having this conversation a little bit earlier, I think that our companies know. But if you have had the opportunity to engage with the continent, to visit, to meet members of the diaspora, I think that it becomes obvious that one of the greatest resources on this continent is the people and the talent. And engaging with the people, the youth, the women of the African continent is, I think, the key to prosperity for all of us. And I think that's also why another key theme in terms of our thinking about our trade and development, our AGOA and our AGOA Plus strategy is about unlocking that inclusivity in our trade relations.
And so, and lastly, and it comes again to the same point about getting bigger, getting better.
Yeah.
About elevating, how do we elevate these relationships with the individual countries? Do you think do you think for now, going through the institutions, or the institutional sort of operations like the AFC, FTA, is the best way to go, or will it be about finding a few key countries? Like which one of those? I know you're going to say everything's, we should do all of them, but are there a few key countries that might help lift the other countries around them, beyond just going through the AU or whoever? So.
You're right. I was going to say we need to be doing everything. But just to put a finer point on it, partnership is the watchword.
Right.
And partnership comes in many different forms. We want to be very respectful of the integrative effort, the creation of the free trade area on the African continent. But we're also going to be looking for opportunities to boost and to demonstrate our commitment to this partnership. So yes, our most developed and articulated program right now on a bilateral basis is with Kenya. We have very strong relations with a number of the countries on the African continent, and we're looking every day for opportunities to break through more. And on this, I would just note, I think in terms of disruptive experiences we've all collectively had over these past years, let me just really emphasize how important and painful the pandemic experience has been, and share with all of you that in struggling to think through how we work towards a pandemic recovery, which can lift the global economy, Africa is very much on our minds, including at the WTO, in terms of our leaning into modifying the intellectual property rules to try to facilitate an expansion of production and more equitable distribution. One of the most powerful lessons that I took was when looking at vaccine production, seeing that Africa does not have a supply chain to supply its own people. And that part of the conversation around industrialization, for some economies, a reindustrialization, is something that I want to indicate is something that we are thinking about here in the United States for ourselves as well, this program of reindustrialization, and something where I think that there is huge potential for partnership with Africa in thinking about supply chains, industrial partnerships, and how we can facilitate the creation of a new version of globalization that breaks free from some of the more traditional patterns of some countries only providing the lower value upstream inputs into supply chains. How can we truly partner and share the links in supply chains in a vision for globalization going forward?
So I'm hoping that all those questions get answered tomorrow. Good. Ambassador, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your time. That was an engaging conversation. Please join me in thanking the Ambassador.